Zeno's paradox. Zeno's paradox talks about motion and how it can seem like an endless process. The most famous version is the story of Achilles and the tortoise. So, there's a runner named Achilles who has to catch up with a tortoise that moves at half his speed. The tortoise gets a 100-meter head start. Now, every time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise began, the tortoise has already moved a little farther ahead. And when Achilles reaches that new point, the tortoise has still moved a bit farther. And this keeps going forever. Of course, in the real world, Achilles would eventually catch up. But if you think about it logically, Achilles would never overtake the tortoise, because distance can always be divided again and again without end. The Barber paradox. The Barber paradox was created by Bertrand Russell, an English mathematician in the early 20th century. The paradox sounds simple, but it'll twist your brain. The story goes like this. In a small village, there's a barber who must shave everyone who does not shave themselves. So here's the question. Does the barber shave himself? If he does, then he's breaking his own rule. But if he doesn't, then he's supposed to shave himself to follow the rule. Either way, it just doesn't make sense. The grandfather paradox. The grandfather paradox is probably the most famous one. You've likely heard of it before. Imagine if you could build a time machine and go back to the past to kill your grandfather before he had any children. That means your father would never be born, and neither would you. But if you were never born, then your time machine wouldn't exist. No time travel, no trip to the past, and your grandfather would still be alive, which means your father would be born. And so would you, to eventually build that same time machine you'd use to kill your grandfather. It's a perfect loop of impossible logic. The omnipotence paradox. The omnipotence paradox has been debated by philosophers since the Middle Ages. The question is a classic one. If God is all-powerful, could he create a stone so heavy that even he couldn't lift it? It sounds simple, but the answer traps logic in a loop. If he could, that means there's something he can't do. Lift the stone. But if he couldn't, that would also mean he isn't all-powerful, because he couldn't create it. That's the omnipotence paradox. Not meant to doubt God's power, but to show that human logic has limits when it comes to understanding the divine. The paradox of choice. The paradox of choice has a simple idea. The more options you have, the less happy you might be, and the more stressed you become. Take online shopping, for example. You open an app planning to buy just one pair of shoes, but suddenly, you're staring at hundreds of models, colors, and brands. Now you're stuck, unsure which one to pick, worried you'll make the wrong choice, and in the end, you don't buy anything at all. This paradox shows that sometimes it's not the lack of options that makes us anxious, but having too many of them which only makes it harder to feel satisfied. The ship of Theseus. This paradox comes from an ancient Greek story. It tells of the ship of Theseus, which was kept in the harbor of Athens as a symbol of history. Over the centuries, the ship was carefully maintained, every decaying plank replaced, one by one, until none of the original pieces remained. The question is it still the same ship of Theseus, or has it become an entirely new ship? This question isn't just about the ship, it's about identity. Because, in fact, the human body also changes over time. Every 10 years, nearly all the cells in our body are replaced with new ones. So if every part of us changes, are we still the same person? The bootstrap paradox. The bootstrap paradox is another kind of time paradox, and it makes the idea of time travel feel really strange if it were actually possible. Imagine you're a huge Ed Sheeran fan. One day, you travel back in time and hand young Ed Sheeran the lyrics to Shape of You. He studies it, rewrites it, and releases it as his own song. Now, the song becomes famous as a work by Ed Sheeran. But wait, if you got the song from Ed Sheeran, and Ed Sheeran got it from you, who wrote it first? That's the core of the bootstrap paradox. A time loop where cause and effect create each other, with no clear beginning at all. The white bear paradox. The white bear paradox comes from Daniel Wegner, an American psychologist back in 1987. He ran a simple experiment. He asked people not to think about a white bear. But strangely, the more they tried not to think about it, the more they did think about it. And that's where this paradox was born. The harder you try not to think about something, the more your mind gets stuck on it. It's like when you tell yourself, don't panic, and somehow you end up panicking even more. This paradox shows how hard it is for humans to control their own thoughts, even with something as simple as don't imagine it.